With Republicans concerned, though, that Donald Trump is doing exactly what the Democrats want, at least in Texas, which is not a usual headline. Democrats eyeing what they see as a closer race in Texas, the possibility of turning it blue, which would be critical to their math to try to take back the Senate, all thanks to Donald Trump. Indeed, there was a headline in a conservative outlet saying this is the one time that both parties apparently agreed. If you look at the Trump side wanting the long shot candidate, the Democrats want the long shot candidate, and they agreed. It's only the Senate Republicans who are closer to the cost who are freaking out. So we have this scandal-ridden, Trump-endorsed, very conservative candidate, Ken Paxton, who beat the long-term, long-time statewide ballot John Cornyn. He's been on that ballot as a senator across over 20 years. He's been on that ballot for other statewide races. This is a sign, among other things, that even in a red MAGA place like Texas, they are, the voters, mad at Senate Republicans. They are not mad necessarily in the Republican primary at Trump specifically, but they ousted a longtime Republican. They're not taking orders from the Republican Party. And apparently, if Trump says he wants to go with the candidate that's more likely to lose the Senate, a lot of voters are going along with that. That itself is interesting. Meanwhile, Paxton's Democratic opponent, James Tallarico, posting the gentleman's mugshot. Paxton, we should note, did settle what was a federal corruption case against him. So legally, he went through the process long enough to get the mugshot, so it's public record. But in fairness to him, he's not in prison. He wasn't convicted. We should also note, though, that in the constitutional process in the state of Texas, which is pretty conservative, he was impeached when serving as Texas Attorney General for alleged offenses that alarmed at least that largely red state. But again, in fairness, I will tell you, he was ultimately acquitted. So legally, he's got the open lane to run. Politically, almost nobody, including Senate Republicans, thought that this mugshot impeached individual was their best chance. Now, Democrats also are drawing the link to other times when we see Trump seize on and support people that the party said would lose, who went on to lose. Walker, Lake, Moore. If you don't remember all those names, that's because they lost. And most people don't sit around remembering the losers of campaigns. They were on the scene for a couple months, and then, despite their Trump endorsement, were not heard from again, not in federal government. Meanwhile, the Cook Political Report, which is kind of a nonpartisan Bible, because of the Trump move here and because Trump's candidate is in, they are now lowering the odds that Republicans win with Paxton. They thought it would have been better with, as I mentioned, the other guy. Meanwhile, the official Republican Senate campaign arm, which was backing Cornyn, now trying to walk back its many attacks on Paxton. The internet, though, might remember.
This is the sound of Texas. And this is how it sounds under Ken Paxton.
Shots fired! Shots fired!
Those are just some of the memorable attacks. The Democrat Tallarico just did a newsworthy interview with Lawrence O'Donnell where they discussed Paxton's baggage.
I can't tell you the number of people who come up to me at the end of these events and whisper, I'm not a Democrat, like they're in the witness protection program, including a lot of people who voted for President Trump in 2024.
That is the sound of a different kind of candidate. You also might remember some have called him a Colbert Democrat because he had that big newsworthy interview on Colbert, which then the government of the Trump administration basically tried to silence under abuse of FCC laws, which, and sometimes this happens, which ended up drawing a lot more attention, support, and even online donations to Tallarico. Now, is he going to get a bigger airing and hearing now? Certainly looks like it. And that dynamic I mentioned, that Republican voters are mad, that doesn't mean they've all turned on Trump. I'm only going to tell you what the numbers show. We're not getting ahead of ourselves with what's happening. But the fact that they're mad and mad at Senate Republicans and that $100 million was spent in this race shows the party is not exactly united, at a minimum. Take Nebraska, a very conservative place where a Republican lawmaker was getting an earful from constituents with some backlash for the Trump agenda.
Why do you continue to protect the pedophiles and Trump's DOJ as they continue to break the law?
What are you going to do about the rampant corruption occurring all over the Trump administration?
I have a question about Congress's approval of wars. Where are you stepping in?
How much did DOJ save the taxpayers? I'll fact check you.
How can your morals let you fall into like with Trump?
That's some of the back and forth, even in red areas where people are even holding town halls. Many Republicans have been avoiding them or carefully vetting them. And as the midterms look bad for the Republicans in the House and worse, getting worse in the Senate, although the math would still be on their side, they have 53. Trump is now saying something that you don't usually hear from an incumbent president who wants to motivate his base. Discussing the war, he says he doesn't care about the midterms.
Their whole economic system is broken down. They thought they were going to outweight me. We'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms.
He doesn't care about the midterms. Now, I told you I always try to keep the fairness in the context. Imagine it's not Trump. You could imagine a different president making a statement like that for foreign policy reasons, trying to say, hey, this other country thinks that I'm under the gun. I'm not politically at home. And if that were just foreign policy strategy, it might be smart. The problem for Donald Trump, of course, is it's not just that he's saying that in war diplomacy or ceasefire talks. He's acting like he doesn't care about the midterms because he keeps siding with candidates that his own party says are worse for the midterms.
Thank you, Ari. Well, it's fascinating. I've worked on both sides of the fence. I actually worked for George W. Bush and Ann Richards, but Ann Richards was the last Texas governor elected 35 years ago. I remember that election because I worked in it. But there hasn't been a Republican elected statewide since. So I'm the guy who every 2 or 4 years is always pushing back when the media or people call me and say, oh, I don't know, this could be the year, blue tide. And I always tap the brakes, but I think something different.
You're saying Democrats have struggled there, yeah.
Yeah. But there's always this notion, or there has been in recent cycles, the Beto race is a good example when he ran against Cruz. But I've always been resistant because I just know how conservative Texas is, generally speaking. So, but I think something's happening that's coming together that could really make this race a possible pickup for Democrats, which is astounding to me. First of all, you have an exceptional candidate in James Tallarico, really just completely unique. And I tell people who may have heard whatever they've heard about him on either side, just watch a speech. He's just got a different approach, different language. He embraces values. He can out-Bible the Republicans on faith issues. And it's really compelling, so stack that up with a candidate who couldn't be, have greater baggage than Ken Paxton. So you have like kind of a pure good, pastor type of character, and the guy who's had all these criminal charges against him and been impeached. So I think you stack all that up, and the fact that Democrats are enthused right now. That's what happens in midterms. It's which party is most enthusiastic. More Democrats voted in this primary than Republicans did in Texas. That's what really got my attention. So the Democrats are cranked up. Whatever happens on the Republican side, and I called a bunch of my Republican friends around the state today, and here's what they said. They said, I'm not yet ready to say I'm going to vote for Tallarico, but I'm absolutely not voting for Ken Paxton.
Well, and that's the issue with what they call low-quality candidates, right? You get a different trend line than the state's trend line, which is still red, if a candidate is low quality enough. And so you mentioned that race with Cruz and Beto, where Cruz won by less than 3 points. What does that tell us about sort of the gap and what Tallarico has to do here? And then I'll let Rev respond to you.
Well, thanks. I think that's a great data point. So you look at that race in 2018, where, again, everybody said, there was a shot here, Democrats, because they had a great candidate in Beto. But Beto really made some mistakes at the end of the campaign. He nationalized the campaign. And at the end of the day, Republicans and these same friends that I talked to just couldn't handle Beto's nationalizing the race. I think that Tallarico learned lessons from that race. I think he'll be a better candidate than Beto was, and I think that Paxton will be a way worse candidate than Cruz. So stack that up. That's an easy 3 points.
Rev?
I would totally agree with Mark on his last statement, better candidate and worse candidate in giving Tallarico and giving Paxton. I think also you have to remember the environment in which we are having the elections. With people's gas prices high, with affordability out of reach for many people. A member of our National Board of National Action Network is a commissioner in Houston, Rodney Ellis. He said people are hurting. Trump people are hurting. And I think that you can clearly look at all of the reasons that a guy like Tallarico would appeal to them. and they don't have the flag in the Bible against Tallarico. It's hard to put the Bible in the hands of Paxton. So I think that you have elements there that, if they're handled right, and we'll see, could lead to a Democratic victory.
Well, it's like Kendrick Lamar said, sometimes you got to hide the Bible if God is watching in a big fight. But you're saying this is a Democrat who's not hiding the Bible. He's going to run tough and strong on his faith.
That's exactly right. And he puts it out there, and it's a state that matters. And he's contrasting with a guy that's been accused of several improprieties, including by his own wife. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I'm trying to out God you or out Jesus you. I'm this and you are that. And he's supported by a president who we all have questions about. But even with all that aside, with affordability and the other issues like Iran and other issues that are troubling the average Republican Texan, I think that Tallarico has a good shot.